Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 7:30 here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta, and Saturday morning, August the 21st. I'm happy to be here. This is Worldwide Epidemic of Child Abuse and Human Rights Abuses. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and the chat room is open if anybody's awake and wants to sit there. And I'm glad to be able to do the shows. Just looking around this morning to see what's happening with all the the human rights issues, the child rights issues, and abuses going on around the world. And I have just tons and tons of information. I had to pick through and find a few that I thought were, important to sort of talk about. There's one that's rather just interesting, but I'm going to start with an article that I found it's from NPR, and it's www.npr.org. And this is called "Brutality Against Women Stirs Fear in Afghanistan." And I'm doing these shows because I wanted to do one show a week that would cover international issues of child abuse and human rights abuses and abuses against women and whatnot around the world, right? And because that's what I study: international community development, human rights, child rights, and whatnot, and more nationally involved, right? But I'm also very interested in what's going on around the world. And so, my main focus when I first got started was the worldwide issue, not so much the national issue of child abuse and especially like domestic violence situations, abuses against women and men, right? And so, I thought, well, I better get nationally involved and then work on getting internationally involved. So, so that's why I'm doing what I do, and I have just tons of information popping into my inbox all the time, as well as just a whole bunch of feeds. I've just got thousands and thousands upon thousands of articles coming in weekly. So I just look through them quickly to see what's happening out there, and it does keep me sort of updated on what is going on around the world, and as far as child rights, human rights, and human rights and abuses, right? So this article here today. This is really sad. Brutality against women stirs fear in Afghanistan. Now, this is just something that's just going on all the time. I study Afghanistan, really. I'm very much interested in Afghanistan, and mainly because I feel that it's really the worst place right now, to be alive. If there's no rights for these women, there's no rights for these children, and children actually probably have a little bit more rights than the women do. But the women just have no rights, period, and the average life expectancy there is really low. It's actually one of the worst on the planet, and it has been for a long time. So these people, they only live to be about 40. If they're lucky, they might live to be 50. And most people in Afghanistan are under the age of 50, and they look like old men and women, like really old. And the 30 decades, not 30 decades, but 3 decades, 30 years of war has caused the whole population pretty much of Afghanistan to know only war. They don't know a time of peace. The people that were born, during a time of peace are dying off, and the rest only know war and poverty and disease and abuse. That's what they know. And so it's a country that needs serious help, and they don't want the issues that are going on in that country. And I talk a lot about this when I'm talking with people because I study Afghanistan, and I actually have friends over there. And so, the average people are very much happy that the world is stepped in there, because the average person does not want the Taliban there. They don't want those extreme terrorists in their country. And there are a few people that do, so they hide them and harbor them, but the majority don't. They want education, they want schooling, they want to get their country back. The women want to be able to walk freely in the streets as their grandmothers did before, their great-grandmothers did before the whole situation started. They were actually able to hold jobs. They were, I forget how much of the percentage of the cabinet for the government of Afghanistan was women, and they were female. Cabinet ministers and whatnot. They had a voice, It's always been a problem with poverty over there, and they've never had that much resources to, for health care and whatnot, and they want that. And they They want education, and they used to have a lot. Girls and women could go to school back in the old days, and then of course the Taliban stepped in and stopped that. So the women are they're smart. They're extremely smart, and they want to build their country back up. And so I really think that we should do all we can to help those people. They need help to get their country back, and they need to kick that whole group of people out that are causing all these problems there. But we'll get right into this article here. August 20th, 2010, this is from NPR. The Taliban has denied that its militants tortured, hanged, and shot a widow in Afghanistan's western Baghdad province for adultery. It's not the principle the Taliban disagrees with. In a lengthy press release, a Taliban spokesman said that the woman should have been stoned to death instead. See, they said, well, she shouldn't have been hanged and tortured and shot. She should have been just stoned to death, right? President Hamid Karzai condemned the stoning in a separate case of a couple put to death in Kunduz province, but he has also been careful in public statements to avoid mentioning topics like women's rights. Human rights advocates say the U.S.-supported government of Afghanistan has not done enough, and that the government's reaction raises questions about plans to reconcile with the Taliban. Pregnant, shot, and killed in Afghanistan. Earlier this month, two brutal incidents caught the world's attention. An Afghan woman appeared on the cover of Time magazine, her nose cut off because she fled an abusive marriage. The other was the pregnant widow in Baghdad province accused of adultery. The local Taliban commander ordered 200 lashes and then shot the woman to death. A Taliban spokesman denied responsibility in both cases. Well, of course, right? Qari Yusuf Ahmadi, a Taliban spokesman speaking by telephone from an undisclosed location, said the genuine Taliban leaders would never mutilate a woman. As for the woman whipped and shot to death for adultery, Ahmadi said the proper sentence is death by stoning. Indeed, this week in the northern province of Kunduz, a Taliban judge ordered just that. And across northern Afghanistan, the resurgent Taliban has carried out several executions that raise questions about the radical movement's command and control over many loosely affiliated fighting groups. According to another Taliban representative, Zabullah Mujahid, excuse my pronunciation here, Mujahid, a young couple eloped but was then lured back to their village in Kunduz province, where a Taliban judge pronounced them guilty of adultery. And Taliban functionaries threw the first stones before a crowd of several hundred male villagers, battering the couple to death. It's revenge and not justice, they said here. Sima Simar, head of the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission in Kabul, says that the Taliban encourages the worst in Afghan society when it sanctions honor killings and public executions. It's revenge. They're not going for justice. They're going to take revenge, Simar says. She says the Taliban represents a current in Afghan society, and it thrives because the Karzai government isn't providing any justice at all. The influential Afghan Council of Muslim Scholars released a statement last week appealing to Karzai to apply Islamic law instead of Afghanistan's legal code. And as Simar points out, the Afghan constitution already says that all the laws in the country must conform with Sharia or Islamic law, just not such an extreme interpretation. The Afghan constitution also guarantees the observance of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other global human rights conventions. But Simar says the Afghan government is sending mixed signals. She fears that the government, in an effort to end the war, is trying to reconcile with Taliban insurgents at the moment at the expense of human rights. So that's just sad. A woman with her nose cut off. I mean, my God. Like, the thing is, because she's fleeing an abusive marriage, right? They just have no protection. They have no rights, these women. And a lot of these girls are, 12 years old and, even younger, 10 years old, 11 years old. They're considered women, and they're sold, basically traded off to be married for, whatever the groom will give the family for her, and these girls, right, they live horrible lives. I actually do a lot of study on Afghan and the women's rights and children's rights there, and it's absolutely ridiculous what's happening over there. And the problem being is that that's what I'm saying, they only live to be about 40, maybe sometimes 50. They're uneducated, they are brainwashed, their sense of compassion and empathy is just zero. And because when you grow up like that, put yourself in their shoes for a minute and think about what it would be like to have your parents grow up like that. Their parents grow up like that, and then you grow up like that. You're just brought into it, and then there's no education, and all you're getting is a whole lot of brainwashing, and there's no sense of law there. It's a very lawless place, and of course with the actual situation going on with the war over there, it's a mess. People are getting killed and blown up. There's no food. There's hardly, there's really not a whole lot of medical. There's only a couple hospitals in the whole country. And women aren't even allowed to go to the hospitals, so it's not like the hospitals are doing any good there, because the women are not allowed to go get help. They're not allowed to see a doctor unless it's a female, and they're not allowed to go because they have to be escorted down the street. So they want the female doctors to come to their homes. They are making great changes. They're making a lot of progress as far as that goes, because they're training a lot of young girls to be midwives. But they're giving them the proper training. So there are some programs over there that are working to help change this. And then with the education going on, people are sneaking to school. They're literally every day getting into vans and going to school, these women and girls, and getting an education on the sly without anybody knowing. But sometimes people find out, they throw acid in their face and blow the school up and kill the teachers. And it's just a mess. It's like something from 2000 BC or something. They need to come up to 2010 with most of the world. There are lots of places in this world that haven't quite got up here with the rest of us, which is unfortunate. But they do need, and we're not perfect, but at least we're trying, and they need to try too, right? And their governments really need to try. But see, all those old people, like I was saying last week, they're all going to have to die off, and the new generations are going to have to become educated and see what's going on around the world that's working, and then implement it within their own culture, to build their own culture, a good, strong culture that, that denotes peace and kindness and goodness and security and, treating their citizens properly and, taking over their country. That's what they need to do. So I'm hoping that we can see this in the future, and for these people, for these women and children and some of these men out there that want a good, peaceful country to live in too. A lot of those men don't appreciate what's going on either, but they have to go along with it, or be killed, right? So many of them actually just, they don't go along with it and they get killed. So it's very sad, and I just think that that's something that we should always be paying attention to, because it's one of the worst places on the planet, if not the very worst place, besides a few places in Africa right now, that a person could possibly live. And these people are stuck there. They don't have a choice, and they're born into ignorance. So what are they supposed to do? They're born right into this mess, and it's rather unfortunate. It's not really it's not their fault, right? But they do need to get their country back, and if they're not going to try to get their country back, then the rest of the world can keep pumping all the money they want into there, and it won't help. You know what I mean? So those young people, the education is what's needed, and to change their country, to change what's happening. So I support a group that is it's a not-for-profit, the Canadian International Learning Foundation out of Ottawa, Canada, and they work to help promote and fund education in Kandahar and other places. I think there's another school in Afghanistan that they work with as well, and also in Uganda. So there's good things going on, and there's lots of. It seems like if we can get enough of that going, then that country will be well on its way to taking itself back in control, right? But in the meantime, we have women walking around with no noses, ears cut off, stoned to death. People are getting stoned and beaten and executed in public. They're getting their heads chopped off, and I mean, it's just barbaric. And those people need to come up to 2010 with the rest of us, you know what I mean, and realize that stuff's from the old days. And okay, so it works in their own culture, but the thing is I consider it to be abuse. So, because there's no trial, how do they even know this stuff is true? A lot of it could be accusations. There's no court system, It's like somebody wants to accuse somebody of doing something over there. All they have to do is point a finger at a woman, and off she goes to be executed, whether it's true or not. That's the sad part, right? And that's what I think needs to stop. This next article I want to look at is from IRIN, IRIN, Humanitarian News and Analysis. It's called "Killing Women in the Name of Killing Women in the Name of Religion, Bangladesh." And this is really sad. sort of the same thing sort of going on over in Afghanistan, right? It says Bangladesh, Dhaka, 13th August 2010, Iran. Nearly 2 decades after a peasant woman's suicide first raised national awareness about the danger of religious rulings, and 1 month after a high court outlawed deadly edicts, killings of women in the name of religion continue in Bangladesh, human rights groups say. 17 years ago, Nurjahan Begum, a peasant woman from northeastern Bangladesh, was publicly stoned after a Shalish, a village ruling council, found her guilty of committing adultery. Immediately after the stoning, she fled to her father's house and took poison to kill herself. And this was the first fatwa we heard about through the national newspaper, and the first time we took action, said Hamida Hossain, chairperson of Ain o Salish Kindra, a local aid and human rights organization. The fatwa is an Islamic religious ruling used at times by elites in Bangladesh's rural villages to the detriment of women, mainly from poor families. Fatwa rulings have resulted in women being beaten and caned, all outside of the law, leading many of them to commit suicide to save family honor, according to rights groups. Because once something like that happens and they are accused, or they're stoned or beaten or whatever, they know that their life will be miserable and their family's life will be miserable, so they just kill themselves. It's just absolutely horrible. Last month, Bangladesh's highest court outlawed all punishments handed down in fatwas, but a weak judicial system coupled with deep-rooted social traditions means that there is still a long way to go, said activist Hossain, and it's very difficult to enforce a law in Bangladesh. The state is very weak. There's always a sense in the community that they know what's best, and they're taking up what they consider to be moral issues. And Bangladesh is 90% Muslim, and rights groups have criticized the government for being slow to prevent atrocities occurring in the name of fatwas, despite a number of high-profile incidents. In Nurjahan's case, the mosque leader and 8 other members of the Shalish were sentenced to 7 years of hard labor in 1994, but most cases do not receive nationwide attention. If the woman doesn't find support, then she tends to give in to whatever's being done to her and take the punishment, said Hossain. A form of control, Kushi Kabir, coordinator of Najiri Kori, a local NGO, told Iran the prevalence of religious punishments against women is attributable to wealthy elites trying to exert control over their communities. In Bangladesh, a lot of issues related to what is considered socially acceptable behavior and what is not considered socially acceptable gets resolved through the Shalish, Kabir said, and it is commonly practiced as a means of control over people who they feel need to be controlled. So it's used by the powerful male elites in the villages over what they feel is behavior that could lead to a lack of control, she said. Waiting for change. Increased media attention and public awareness is slowly starting to empower more of Bangladesh's women to understand their constitutional rights and take a stand against violent methods of oppression. Eventually, public awareness will instigate change. Now more and more news is appearing in the newspapers about religious punishments, the fatwas, which means that it has been quite a sensation, said Syeda Rizwana Hassan, chief executive of the Bangladesh Environmental Lawyers Association. Previously it was there, but nobody ever wrote about it because it was taken as part of society. But now people have started protesting against it, she said. Women's voices are being heard more and more, but they are not more powerful. It's just the second generation of people coming out of the houses. So, I mean, that's really, this is going on all over Asia and all over Southeast Asia and many parts of the world where women are just, their rights they just don't have any, you know what I mean? And even in North America, I mean, we have our problems here too. It's not like we don't have these issues going on here. It's just that you generally don't hear about women getting their nose cut off, and they don't generally get stoned. The abusive partner or whatever, or some family member just kills them. But it doesn't matter. It's absolutely sad that this stuff is going on, and these women, and it's like you got to think about the whole family situation. Like, are their children being left behind? When their mothers are killed and stoned, and or go and commit suicide because of something like that. I mean, probably there would be children in the picture. They'll lose their mother, but of course they'll just look down upon her because society looked down upon her, so they would too. And like, the whole thing is really sad. And I hope that eventually there's some real changes. We really need to see some changes, that's for sure. I thank God for being born in North America every day, I tell you that. So at least we have some protection here. It's not perfect, that's for sure, but there is some law and there is some protection. So I can't imagine trying to being a woman in one of those countries where women just don't have rights and their lives are basically taken into their own hands every time they leave the house. And within their own homes. I mean, there's no, like in Afghanistan with these women trying to escape these abusive marriages, these abusive husbands and whatnot, or abusive mother-in-laws. A lot of times it's the mother-in-law who's abusing them, right? They have no recourse. They have nowhere to go. Even if they flee, they end up with living in a city trying to find help from from some group who will actually take them in because they can't work, right? And they're not allowed to be on the street walking around unescorted because they'll just be shot down or killed, right? So the whole thing is extremely sad, and I hope that people will wake up to the fact that we do, as a world, we need to try to help these people out. We got to help our own countries out too. So we can't just help the world out and not help our own countries out. And I'm a big promoter of helping our own countries first, but we also have to keep those people in mind as well, because otherwise we're going to continue to have the problems that we do with these people, because their countries are staying so ignorant, because the leaders in those countries will not wake up and smell the coffee and care about their citizens and care about what's happening within their countries. So all those people need to die off quickly, right? And then we need to have a whole new group coming up who are educated and want peace and want their countries to be strong and get some good economy going there, where they can grow their own food and where they can look after each other and set up laws that will reflect what the country needs instead of these old laws from back in Moses' time. I mean, my God, this is absolutely ridiculous. It's not right. Excuse me. We have forest fires here in BC, right next door to the province, and we've had Calgary, Alberta, the city, has been covered in forest fire smoke for weeks, and so it's really starting to play havoc with everybody. We're having a hard time breathing actually over here because of the smoke, right, from the forest fires in the next province over. Huge, massive forest fires. So today, when I woke up, I couldn't hardly even breathe, and of course I smoke, so it just doesn't help, right? So sorry about that. Having a little bit of trouble catching my breath here. This next article is really interesting. I just wanted to cover this because I think it's so interesting. This is from IRIN as well, IRIN. It says, Somalia, Halima Moalim Abikar. I could not remain silent about what was happening in my own backyard. This is Nairobi, August 19, 2010. Bombs, mortar shells, and bullets have displaced more than 1 million people in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. Halima Moalim Abikar is not one of them. The 50-year-old human rights activist decided to stay put to ensure that abuses committed as African Union-backed government forces and Islamist militias battle it out are not forgotten. To mark the Second World Humanitarian Day, Irene spoke to Abikar by phone about her life and work with the Hanad organization. I was born and bred in Mogadishu. I have witnessed the civil wars and the factional fighting that continue to this day. My days normally begin at dawn after morning prayers. I then walk or take the bus to our offices 2 kilometers away. We begin by discussing with colleagues that day's activities, and sometimes we organize protests against atrocities committed by the warring groups. At times we are busy trying to find support for a girl who has been raped the day before. We are never short of something to do. The need here is immense. Recently, August 3rd, a group of 21 women were killed when a bomb exploded as they were cleaning a street. We organized a demonstration to protest against the killings and condemn those behind it. For us, at Hanad, it was another day of doing what we do every day. And I do what I do because of what I have seen in Mogadishu. I have witnessed horrific acts of depravity. I have seen a 7-year-old raped, and I have seen toddlers torn to pieces by shells. After some time, and along with other like-minded women, I decided I could not remain silent about what was happening in my own backyard. That is why we formed our organization to advocate for peace and human rights. And in Mogadishu today, women and children bear the brunt of the violence. Violence is a daily diet for us here. Our children know no other life. How can one remain uninvolved and unmoved by this? And so this is her quotes, right? Whatever started this war, nothing can justify what is happening now, and that is why I do what I do to try to help stop it. If I can contribute even a little bit to peace and stability in my country, I will die a happy woman. The main challenge we face every day is what everyone in Mogadishu faces, the general insecurity. You cannot be sure that if you leave your home, you will come back alive or even in one piece. In addition, I face personal challenges because not everyone approves of what I do. Of course, there are bound to be people who see what we do negatively, and we face that. A number of humanitarian human rights workers have been killed or threatened in the city. I know of people who receive messages threatening them, and I know of people who are killed because of what they do. And at Hanad, we try to be impartial at all times, and we don't side with any group. We tell them, the warring sides, that we are not on any side, but on the people's side, and this is all we can do. I sometimes use my poetry to raise their consciences. What else can I do? I do not have bodyguards or weapons to defend myself. Everything else, I leave to God. I like that. What an awesome lady, and that's just the whole thing. She's taken her life into her own hands all the time, daily, right? And a lot of these people do. And this is why I wanted to get involved internationally as well, because I know that in these countries, in Africa and Afghanistan and whatnot, and certain places around the world, anyone who speaks out against the status quo, takes their life into their own hands. They quite often have. They don't even go into hiding because they know that won't be able to. They won't help anybody by doing that. So what they do is they just courageously walk up and down the street and they do their thing. And sometimes their family members are murdered. Sometimes they're killed. And I do a lot of study on Afghanistan, like I said. So I study all the people who have been, who were leaders in trying to get help to the people, for humanitarian issues and whatnot, especially women, and how many people have been gunned down. And there's some awesome books out there and about these women, who lost their lives or who's were attempted murder on their life all the time because. Of course, the people who are running the show don't want them to be there because they're making too much noise. They're stirring up, and they're helping people, So a lot of times they'll kill these people just because they help somebody. And so that's really pathetic because in these countries like North America, and thank God most of Western Europe, we can stand up. We can raise our voices. So that's why it's so important that we do, right? It's over here. I don't have to worry about that. I can walk down the street. I am quite opinionated. I try to be polite on my shows, but I am very much opinionated about what's going on. And if I was doing this in another country, I would probably be stoned or shot or acid thrown in my face. You know what I mean? Because I'm a woman. See, but here in North America, I can sit here, I can do this, and I know I can leave my house in relative safety. You know what I mean? And even if somebody does try to bother me, I can just go to the courts and I can go and get a restraining order and I can try to protect myself. Whereas in those countries, there's just no protection, period. And there's bombs everywhere and guns and people, they have access to that stuff. So, we have a voice. And so that's what I thought. I thought, what I'd like to do eventually is walk right down the middle of the street in Kandahar myself. One day I picture myself doing this. I'm going to do this, because those women put themselves on the line every day. So every day I sit here in peace and comfort and security and being able to raise my voice, and that's what we all need to do. And we're allowed to do that here. Thank God for human rights. And if we don't protect those human rights, they will be taken away, guaranteed. That's what happens. It's historical. It's proven. So if we don't stand up for child rights, if we don't stand up for human rights, they will disappear. And so we have to fight for them all the time. And that's what people have lost their lives over the myriad of thousands of years to secure these rights. So we have to make sure that we back them up and keep going with this, And I hope that more and more people will get involved, right? So have about a minute left. Thanks everybody for tuning in this morning, and I appreciate all the support and people who are listening to my archives and everything. It's just awesome. And if I can get information for you, or if you just want to chat or whatever, get a hold of me on Blog Talk Radio or Facebook. I'll be around, and otherwise you can check out my show page and see which shows are coming up next. Monday night, don't miss Ray Luskin. Ray Luskin's coming on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Elizabeth Brawley, myself, are going to have an informal chat with Ray Luskin, and she's got a whole lot of information on healing and wholeness and treatments that she knows about for adult survivors of child abuse. So don't miss that. I had her on my show, and it was just a great time, and it was an awesome hour to spend with that lady. She's an awesome lady, and so we're going to have her on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio as well. So have a great night, everybody, and make sure you check out Be Safe First Always, Blog Talk Radio, www.blogtalkradio.com. blogtalkradio.com/B, the letter B, SAFE, the number 1ST, always ALWAYS, John Harrison. He's a poet, he's an advocate, he's a survivor, and he's doing a whole lot of great work. And he's here in my chat room right now. Hello, John. And so, yeah, make sure you check out his Blog Talk shows. They are awesome. He does them once a week and maybe, you know, a little, one or more here and there, but guaranteed on Fridays. So make sure you do tune into his show because I love to listen to what John has to say. So have a great day, everybody, and we'll be talking to you real soon. Take care of yourselves. If you need something, get a hold of me. And until next time, bye-bye.